My name is Maria Dalton. I'm turning 27 this year. 5 years into a marriage that once felt like a blessing, but lately feels like a slow, quiet storm. My son, Martin, just turned 4. He's the brightest part of my life, even as everything else around me begins to dim. After getting married, I worked full-time, but now I juggle a part-time schedule so I can give more time to my family. My husband, Kevin, is 3 years older. He used to be warm, persistent, passionate, the man who chased me, insisted that we were meant for each other. But once we married, something in him shifted. That passion hardened into something cold, something controlling. Kevin has a 20-year-old sister, Jane Dalton, and the age gap between them turned their bond into something closer to indulgence than affection. Before marriage, I didn't think much of her visits. She was young, cheerful, clingy, harmless. But after I became his wife, her behavior sharpened. Jane drops by whenever she wants, day, night, it doesn't matter. She never brings anything, never asks if it's convenient. She just breezes inside and calls out, "Brother, I'm here again," as if I don't exist. And Kevin? He encourages it. He expects me to serve her, entertain her, feed her, no matter how unprepared I am. And when I scramble to put dinner together, Jane sits comfortably at the table while Kevin scolds me in front of her for not being considerate. She apologizes on the surface, but her eyes shine with satisfaction at being the favored one. Most nights, I eat the leftovers. Kevin and Jane lounge on the sofa laughing, chatting, leaving the table dirty. They don't acknowledge Martin, they barely acknowledge me. One evening, as I was getting ready to bathe Martin, Kevin barged in and told me to buy a cake for Jane, immediately. Even though it was late, even though stores were closing, even though I was holding a tired 4-year-old in my arms. And Jane, sitting on our couch like it was her throne, insisted she wanted it now. Kevin blamed me for wasting time, and with no choice left, I grabbed Martin's jacket and headed out. On my way out, I overheard them. "She's so inconsiderate. Kevin, why did you even marry her?" The words stung more than I expected. Martin, sensing my mood though too young to understand, tugged on my sleeve. "Mommy, can we get one with lots of fruits? I love those." So we went, mother and son, hands intertwined, talking about cake flavors instead of hurtful words. We reached the shop just before closing. I bought Jane's cake and a fruit-filled one for Martin. When we returned home, I served theirs first, then brought out Martin's cake to the dining room. But the moment I placed it in front of him, Jane's eyes narrowed. "I want that one," she said, pointing at the cake meant for my child. Before I could speak, Kevin grabbed Martin's cake and slid it in front of Jane. Martin's voice shook as he protested. "Daddy, that's mine." Kevin didn't care. "I bought it. I decide who eats what," he said coldly. That was the moment something inside me finally cracked. I spoke up, really spoke up, for the first time in months, and Kevin, without hesitation, snapped back. "If you don't like it, we can get a divorce." Martin froze. His little hand found mine, trembling. Then he whispered, as if trying to soothe me, "Mom, I like strawberry cake too. It's yummy." He said it while forcing himself to eat the cake Jane didn't want. When I saw Jane reaching for his slice again, I couldn't take it anymore. I lifted Martin's plate, picked him up, and took him to another room where he could eat in peace. Kevin apologized to Jane. "Sorry, sis, I know I'm being stingy," he said. I wanted to scream, but instead I focused on the only thing that mattered, watching my son eat his cake happily, away from the chaos. That night, Martin and I took a late bath and fell asleep together in his small bed. The next morning, Jane was gone. The house was quiet, too quiet. Then I heard a sudden cry. Martin's piggy bank, his favorite gift from my father, lay shattered on the floor. The coins he saved so proudly, gone. When I asked Kevin, he shrugged. "Oh, Jane needed money, so she took it." I held Martin as he sobbed, shaking, and I cried, too, because I finally saw the truth. Kevin cared more about his sister than his own son. Through my tears, I confronted him, really confronted him. For the first time, Martin witnessed the storm inside me. Kevin didn't argue. He didn't apologize. He simply walked into the bedroom, returned with a folder, and tossed it onto the table. "Divorce papers," prepared, hidden, waiting. That was the moment I realized. He had been planning to leave long before I ever dared to speak. I didn't know what to think. One moment Kevin was silent. The next he exploded, shoving the divorce papers into my hands before slamming the door so hard the entire house shook. Martin, who had always stayed quiet during Kevin and Jane's mistreatment, finally broke. He'd cried all night, and even now his small face was puffy, his voice weak from sobbing. My heart couldn't take it. So I knelt beside him and whispered, "Should we skip daycare today?" His eyes lit up with a fragile, hopeful sparkle. "Yes," he chirped, forcing the tiniest smile. And just like that, the two of us made a quiet promise. This day belonged to him. I called work, ready for backlash, but when they heard the distress in my voice, they understood. They gave me the day off without hesitation. In the morning, Martin and I escaped to the park. We played hide and seek, chased each other around the slide, and made tiny sandcastles in the sandbox. For a few precious hours, it felt like we'd stepped out of our troubles and into a bubble where only laughter existed. By lunchtime, he grew drowsy. Usually, Martin naps alone, but today he curled up in my lap, like he did before he could walk or talk, and fell asleep instantly. I thought about getting up to do chores, but instead I stayed still, letting his warm breath and peaceful face heal the cracks in my heart. Then everything changed. A sharp noise came from the front hallway, the sound of our door unlocking. Kevin never returned home at this time. My blood ran cold. Instinct took over. I grabbed Martin and slipped into the bedroom closet, holding him tight. Footsteps echoed through the house. A voice followed. "Jane." Trembling, I held my breath as she rummaged through drawers, muttering angrily. "What the hell? It should be here." Then she made a call. Yes, I looked everywhere. "No, Kevin, I told you it's not here." "Are you sure she didn't hide it somewhere else?" She slammed drawers, cursed under her breath, and after minutes that felt like hours, finally left, locking the door behind her. When the house fell silent, I gently tucked Martin into bed and stood in the living room, my hands shaking. What were they looking for? Why was Jane entering my home when Kevin wasn't even here? Why did Kevin act like a stranger, or worse, an enemy? Fear crawled up my spine, cold and choking. I didn't waste another second. I packed the essentials, for Martin, for myself, and we ran to the station. My parents lived only 2 stops away. I didn't call them first. I didn't have the emotional strength to speak. But the moment they saw us at the door, one look at my face told them everything. They pulled us inside without a single question. Later, when I finally managed to speak, I told them everything: Kevin's sudden divorce papers, Jane's intrusion, their desperate search through my belongings. My mother listened quietly, then murmured the thought I had been too afraid to consider. "Maria, what if Jane was looking for your money, your cards?" Her words struck me like lightning. Before marrying Kevin, I had built a successful handmade goods company, one I still owned as CEO, though I entrusted daily operations to my closest friends. Kevin never knew the full truth. I always avoided telling him, because early in our marriage I'd realized something unsettling. Kevin couldn't handle money, at all. He spent everything he earned. He provided only $200 a month for food. He tried to force me into being a full-time housewife. He made me sign a post-marital property waiver so I couldn't claim assets in divorce. If it weren't for my hidden savings, Martin wouldn't have had clothes, nursery fees, or even proper meals. I never asked Kevin for anything beyond the $200 food allowance, so he assumed I always had extra money. And now, Jane needed money. Kevin knew I had savings. They were searching the house. I remembered the look on Jane's face as she raided our drawers, the frustration, the anger. They weren't just invading my privacy. They were hunting. For my money. For my cards. For anything they could grab before Kevin forced the divorce through. And in that moment, surrounded by my parents' warmth and my sleeping child, I realized I was no longer safe with the man I once loved. I kept a separate savings account just for Martin. Every month, a portion of my salary went straight into it, untouched, invisible, safe. And thank God for that. No matter how hard they searched the house, they would never find my cash cards. I always carried my valuables with me. But one thought refused to leave my mind. Jane had probably been entering our house even when we weren't home. And Kevin, he was likely letting her. At my father's advice, I moved all my valuables into my parents' safe. For the first time in years, I could breathe. But Martin couldn't. He stood before my father, sobbing over his shattered piggy bank, the symbol of his tiny dreams. My father's face hardened with anger. He wanted to call Kevin immediately and demand answers. But my mother urged caution. With Kevin pushing divorce, one wrong word could shift blame onto us and give him an advantage. We needed to know their intentions. We needed proof. So I decided I would record everything. With guidance from my father's lawyer friend, I returned home. I placed my phone face down on the counter, recording secretly while I started preparing dinner. Moments later, Kevin walked in. And his first question wasn't about Martin, not about me. It was about my cash cards. When I calmly asked him why, he dodged, lied, tried to twist the conversation. My silence seemed to provoke him. His voice rose, his frustration growing uglier with every word. Finally, he snapped. He demanded all my part-time earnings for Jane. I stood firm. That money is for Martin, I said. His face twisted with fury. He shoved the divorce papers toward me again. You live off my money. You don't need savings. Jane needs it more. Hearing him say it out loud, valuing Jane over his own son, made something inside me shatter. I stopped cooking. I put the papers in my bag. I took Martin's hand. And without a single word, I headed for the door. Behind me, Kevin shouted that he was serious about the divorce, that I should never return. I turned once and said quietly, I won't come back to a house where strangers can walk in any time they want. That night, Kevin's messages and calls flooded my phone, dozens, then hundreds. I turned the device off. At my parents' home, I showed them the recording, the papers, everything. They listened without judgment. When I confessed that I felt nothing for Kevin anymore, only concern for Martin, they told me the choice was mine. They would support me. And they were right. Whatever happened next would shape Martin's fragile heart. As we talked, Martin tugged on my sleeve. Mom, I'm hungry. My mother, seeing my exhaustion, prepared hamburgers, his favorite. As Martin ate with pure joy, my eyes burned with tears. Grandma made this so you and Mommy can visit anytime, she told him gently. Martin beamed. Grandma's hamburgers are the best. I want them every day. I smiled through tears. It tastes good because it's filled with love, I said. He took a giant bite and held it up to my lips. Then Mommy should eat it too. I broke. The tears came no matter how hard I tried to stop them. My father kneeled beside Martin. These are happy tears, he explained. Martin wrapped his arms around me. My father's eyes reddened too. Family, I whispered to Martin, is precious. He blinked. But Daddy said only Jane is family. A painful truth, but my father gave the answer Martin needed. Well, do you want to live with us, as family? Martin grinned and laughed. Yes. Even our old dog became part of his joy. He called him his little brother, despite the dog being much older. That night, the house felt warm, safe, complete. And that's when I finally knew I was done with Kevin. The next day, I met with the lawyer. The divorce proceedings began. While my father played with Martin, I lay quietly, remembering the days I used to dream of a peaceful home. But peace returned only when I left Kevin. The following morning, my phone displayed more than 200 missed calls and messages. Kevin's emotional instability seeped through every line. I powered the phone off again. Through the lawyer, I learned the truth. Jane had massive debts from casinos and compulsive shopping. Kevin was her guarantor. And they had planned to drain my savings to pay it off. The divorce papers had already been submitted. When Kevin realized it was final, he broke down crying. I braced myself for a battle over child support. But shockingly, he signed the agreement, $340 a month for Martin. Later, Kevin called. His voice was different, no yelling, no threats. He admitted the manipulation. He admitted using me financially. He admitted his twisted guilt and loyalty toward Jane. I told him firmly I would never go back. He sobbed quietly, wished me happiness, and hung up. I stayed strong until the end. Now, With my parents by my side, I've resumed my role as company president. Martin is thriving, and Kevin and Jane, after confessing everything to their own parents, were disowned, left to face the consequences of their own choices. Today, I finally feel what I thought I'd forgotten: happiness, safety, family. And I'm grateful every single day.